Okay, well, good evening, vinyl community. I haven't done a video in about 2 months. Changing my setup. I think it's going to look a lot better. Hopefully, it sounds good. I'm actually doing this one using my Pixel phone, so let's hope the video is better. And I'm kind of watching the Oscars in the background while I'm doing this. So, I'm going to kind of do this video the same as I've been doing the last couple. Start with some heavy rotation, talk some jazz, then talk classical at the end because I know most people aren't interested in classical, so I always save that to the end so people can skip it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about classical than in the last couple of videos. So, we'll just start with some stuff I've been listening to. I want to just kick it off with, unfortunately, we're going to talk about the passing of Country Joe McDonald, Country Joe and the Fish. So this is a recent acquisition by me. It's a greatest hits album. I'd never heard it until this week. Super quick. My main album, my intro to Country Joe and the Fish, was this album. It's a compilation, two LPs, part studio stuff, part live stuff. The live stuff's also really good. There's a little bit of overlap between songs on the two. Some stuff on this one that's not on this one, and vice versa. This was cool. Some stuff on here I'd never heard. Just want to draw your attention real quick. This album has a strange, kind of haunting Vietnam protest song called An Untitled Protest. That sucker always runs a chill down my spine every time I listen to it. But yeah, an incredible psychedelic artist from the 60s. Rest in peace, Country Joe McDonald. So, if you haven't seen it, there's a new film about Paul McCartney out. I actually saw it in the theaters. You can stream it on Amazon Prime. It's called Man on the Run. It's a documentary about basically the decade following the Beatles. Talks mostly about Wings, also how the breakup of the Beatles affected Paul, how Lennon's death affected Paul. Great movie. Really recommend it. And it kind of inspired me to listen to this. This is the 3 LP live album that Wings put out from their big tour of the States in, I believe, 76, called Wings Over America. Triple album. I love it. I think it's great. It's very well recorded. It sounds great. I think the live versions are even better than the studio versions. And it's a really great sounding live album. It's just very, just uh, fat sound. There's parts where the horn section kicks in, and it's just like a very full, very thick sounding live recording, but you can hear the audience and everything. Oh, there's part of the show where Paul breaks out a couple Beatles songs, just him on an acoustic guitar. This is just a lovely, just killer live album. So that's Wings Over America. Um, this was a new album for me. This is the album Low Life by New Order. I just heard this for the first time this week. Um, Love New Order. I'd never heard this album. For some reason, I thought this was a later album. I was wrong. This is their third album. It's the one right after Blue Monday. So, um, imagine finding a band that you're crazy about and then finding out they have an amazing album of them at their absolute peak that you'd never listened to, and then you hear it. That's what it was like for me hearing this album. I'm like, holy shit, why have I never listened to this thing? It's like New Order at their peak, and it's brand new to me, man. I'd never heard this album. And this is an original copy. I'd say it's a solid VG plus, so that's a real treat. Super quick. Um, I would compare hearing this album to basically finding out that there was a primo Pink Floyd album recorded at their absolute peak. And there is an album. It's called Obscured by Clouds. This was a soundtrack album the band did in 1972. This is the last thing they did before Dark Side of the Moon. And I just mention it because to this day, I'm still running into people that have never heard this album. I think people assume it's like a weird album or it's a soundtrack album. This is like the absolute gem in Floyd's catalog that a lot of people have never heard. So, anyway, hearing this would be like discovering this for the first time. A real treat. Movie soundtrack. This is the soundtrack to Altered States. So maybe you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. A very strange film, I think from like 1980 or 81, 82, something like that. Directed by Ken Russell. I just realized this is actually a Ken Russell film, which explains why it's so weird. But this is a great soundtrack album. It's by the composer John Corigliani, and I'm probably not pronouncing his name right. I recognize that name because I used to work at Tower Records back in the 90s, and I worked in the classical section. And he was kind of a big contemporary composer at that time. And hearing the soundtrack makes me want to check out some of his compositions because this is just a dynamite soundtrack. It's parts of it are very weird. It's definitely a movie soundtrack, but then there's just some incidental music that's just very pretty, and it's the vinyl's dead quiet. So yeah, this was a real deal. I really enjoyed listening to this, and just another heavy rotation. Gotta love Sergio Mendes in Brazil '66. These are dollar bin albums if ever there was one. I just love this stuff, and I'd say this is one of the better albums that I've heard. There's a lot of them. This is a really good one, and the sound is just quite outstanding, and it's just a great reminder that how good the records on A&M were during this period. This is just one of those periods where stuff on A&M when you see that kind of tan gold record label, you know you're in for a treat. It's sort of like seeing an olive green label from Warner Brothers in the early 70s. You know they're just going to sound great. So, yeah, this is a total dollar bin album, but well worth listening to. So, we're going to head into the jazz section now. So, this album was. This is one of the tone poets that's gotten a lot of buzz. I kept hearing people recommending this album called Katanga. Now, this is one of those weird tone poets that Blue Note's doing where they're putting out stuff that was actually not on Tone Poets, but they're able to get the tapes and put it out. So this was an album that was on the Pacific Jazz label. This one's kind of strange. The musicians came from obscurity, and after this album, they returned to obscurity. Yeah, the liner notes talk about it. The musicians, I don't think people even know what became of the people in this band. Believe one of the members they know was in jail, and believe he died of an overdose shortly thereafter. So yeah, some very talented musicians put out this banger album in the early 60s, and then it disappeared until it got resurrected by Tone Poet. But this is just a fantastic album. I guess I would kind of classify it as modal jazz. If you like Miles from kind of the second quintet period, you might like this album. This album got a lot of buzz, and I can understand why. It seems to be one of the tone poets that people got really excited about, and it's easy to see why. So check out Katanga. And I'm watching the Oscars, and I'm hoping that they finally give Johnny Greenwood an Oscar for his film scores. But being the Oscars, he'll probably get screwed over again. But man, he is way overdue for recognition for his soundtrack work. So, no, in my last video, I mentioned that I was on the hunt for some stuff from the CTI label. That I was looking for. I was kind of going through a pretty heavy jazz period, and I wasn't able to find a whole lot. But here's two that I'm going to mention quickly. This is on compact disc. Antonio Carlos Jobim, the album Stoneflower. I think this is from the early 70s. This was very highly recommended to me. I'm reading the back here. Ron Carter and Hubert Laws appear on this album. Yeah, I'm kind of new to his music, and this was one of the albums that was recommended to me, and it is great. And when I was at the record show down in Richmond, I was looking for some CTI. I got this. I assumed that this was a CTI compilation album because it's called the Giant Box. So I figured it's a box set of stuff from the CTI label. And it's all arranged and conducted by Don Sebesky. It's not. It's actually just a jam session. All the luminaries from the CTI label were, it was like the Monsters of Folk album for CTI. They just got all the big heavy hitters on here. Grover Washington, Freddie Hubbard, Milt Jackson, Ron Carter, Hubert Laws, Billy Cobham, and they just let these guys go hog wild and put out a double album with these guys in the studio, screwing around, and it sounds so damn good. Interesting. It opens with a jazz arrangement of Stravinsky's Firebird that kind of blends its way into Birds of Fire by the Mahavishnu Orchestra. So it's like their version of Birds of Fire. It ends with a track called Semi-Tough, which is just gorgeous 70s funkiness, and it's just funkiness at its finest, and it's just so good. And this was a real treat. I really like this. Again, it seems like it's kind of a CTI jam session where they just put all these guys in a studio and just said, "Go to town, guys," and it's just so much fun. Oh, and I meant to mention this during heavy rotation, but it fell off. Was always been a big fan of the band Pulp. They finally, after a very long period of absence, put out a new album. I think this came out at least a year ago. I've been sitting on this disc for a while. For some reason, I just wasn't in the mood. I kind of was thinking, I don't want to listen to it and be disappointed. It's been 20 years since they last put out an album. I finally got around to listening to it last week. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. This easily is just up to the standards of all their old stuff. It's just an absolute knockout album. Like, why didn't I listen to it sooner? So yeah, Pulp has put together a new album after a very long period. This is Jarvis Cocker's band, of course. I was lucky enough to see Jarvis Cocker on his first solo tour when I lived in Seattle. But yeah, Pulp has returned with an absolute banger album, and it's so good, and I need to listen to it again. So more jazz. Just gonna throw this out here. Big fan of Diodato, an artist that started on CTI, famous for his arrangement of Also Sprach Zarathustra. And this is a later album. This is on Warner Brothers. And good old Umar is definitely kind of entered the disco era on this album. You can tell that this is kind of a later 70s album. But it's good. It's worth listening to. You can definitely tell it's from the disco era. It even has a track called Pina Colada on it. But this is fun. This is really good stuff. I enjoyed it. Last jazz album I'm going to talk about tonight. I gave this one another spin. Bobby Hutcherson. You can't tell, I'm kind of a fan of 70s jazz. This is Bobby with an all-star cast: Freddie Hubbard, Andrew Hill, Reggie Johnson, Joe Chambers. I just listened to this again the other night. Highly recommended. Great stuff. So yeah, we're gonna head into classical now, and the first thing I'm gonna touch on is that I'm gonna do a little bit of a mea culpa. I was a little bit harsh on the Andre Previn box set that I talked about a while back. This is a 96 CD behemoth, and there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm probably never going to listen to, and there's just like a lot of material in here. There's probably some hits and misses. I'm not even close to being done with this box set, but I have been listening to more of it, and it's better than I thought. There's some real gems hiding in this box set. So one of the things that took me by surprise was I did find that most of what everyone's interested in is the early 70s stuff with the London Symphony. I was really surprised how good some of the later stuff from the digital era was. He seems like he ended up at the Royal Philharmonic, and this was the first disc that was like kind of got me thinking, this is better than I thought. This is Previn conducting the Royal Philharmonic. There's 3 CDs that make up this set of Saint-Saëns piano concertos, and you think you're expecting some sort of 80s digital awfulness, but no, I was really maybe it's been remastered, but I found the sound just very natural, good balance between orchestra and piano. I was really surprised how good this disc was, and the other two. Another one of the later ones, we got Walton Viola and Violin Concerto with Nigel Kennedy. Oh my God, he's barely a teenager. Look how young he is in that. I mean, Nigel Kennedy is practically a freaking kid in this picture. But I was surprised. This was really solid. It was one of the later recordings from this box set, 1987. So then we start diving into some other stuff. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of Shostakovich in here. I am not a big Shostakovich fan, but already, I'm having kind of a hard time wrapping my head around them. Baba Yar, the 13th Symphony. I'd never heard it before. This one I really liked. I really liked the 13th Symphony. And I compared this recording with another recording of the 13th, and I definitely preferred Previn's. So, yeah, good to hear some Shostakovich that finally started to make some sense to me. Another one with the Royal Phil, a surprisingly good German Requiem hiding in this box set. I just love the German Requiem. Never mind hearing another recording of it. A very strong recording of the Dvorak Cello Concerto with Paul Tortelier on the cello. And of course, it's really hard to screw up La Mer and the Three Nocturnes by Debussy. This is a 1983 recording with London. It's La Mer, it's Debussy, it's well done. Nothing to complain about. Now, one thing I will complain about, there was a recording of the Korngold Violin Concerto by Eric Korngold. Itzhak Perlman, recorded with Pittsburgh. Probably a great performance. It's kind of hard to tell because Perlman's mic'd so spotlit in the recording that you really kind of can't even hear the orchestra. The whole thing is focused on this rock star violinist. I'm going to contrast that recording with this recording on the Dorian label. Andrew Litton conducting the Dallas Symphony Orchestra in the Korngold Violin Concerto, and a Sinfonietta by Korngold. I just think that the sound quality just kind of kills the Previn. This is a much more kind of balanced, natural sounding recording where the violinist doesn't overpower the orchestra. You get just kind of a good, you can actually hear what the composer's written for the symphony. I'm a big fan of the Dorian label. I think they did great work. Full digital recordings. I started listening to the Dorian label, like I said, when I worked at Tower in the 90s. I've always, when I'm hunting for CDs in the dollar bin, if I see something on the Dorian label, I grab it because they always do good stuff. So I'm going to give a shout out to a really good God, the majority of this stack that I got here is all classical stuff. I'm going to give a shout out to this YouTube channel. I'll try to include a link. It's called Flowering Spikes. This guy runs a record store in Thousand Oaks, California. Every week he posts a video where he shows new records that have shown up in his store. And he did a shootout a couple weeks ago where he compared versions of the Firebird Suite. And I'm going to do kind of a quick little shootout myself of recordings for Prokofiev's Fifth Symphony. This is the Ormandy recording. It's always been my go-to. I've had this recording for quite a few years. And I've been meaning to hear some different recordings of the Fifth. And just some things fell into place, and a whole bunch of recordings of the Fifth Symphony showed up in dollar bins. So I suddenly found myself with 4 new recordings of the Prokofiev 5. And I want to do a quick shootout. We got Previn from the Previn box set, London Symphony. Previn again with the LA Phil. We have a very famous Herbert von Karajan, Berlin Philharmonic, Prokofiev 5. And we got Leonard Bernstein, New York Phil, Prokofiev 5. And I'm going to do a quick ranking here. This was the first, I picked this one up first because, again, I was looking for like an alternate interpretation to Ormandy, and I was really excited when I first heard this. Now comparing it to the other 3, it's a little bit bland. There's nothing that really makes it stand out compared to the other 3, but it's still, when I first heard it, I thought it was great. But comparing it to the others, of the 4, I'd put this one kind of at the bottom of the 4. Then, surprise, surprise, third place would go to Herbie. This is a very famous recording. When I listened to it, I thought this is also a great. All 4 of these are great. Okay, they're all very good recordings. This one, I could hear things in the score that I don't normally hear, and that's good. It wasn't that thing you normally get with Von Karajan, where it's just like this just string section that just kind of washes on away everything else in the score. You could definitely hear details and things in Prokofiev's score that I had never heard before. I can understand why this is such a highly praised recording, but surprise, surprise, I think it was topped by the Bernstein. I think there's a little bit better transparency in recording and hear more details in the Bernstein. Lenny kind of, people always think that he's goofing around with the score and he's playing fast and loose with the tempos. Actually, he's not. He seems to have this just talent for just sort of making, drawing things out of the score. There are passages, drawing your attention to passages that you normally don't notice. And he does that here. There's just passages where he seems to kind of emphasize things that other people just kind of miss. And he's not really goofing around with the tempos very much. I'd say the one thing that's kind of his vision of how the piece should go is he he really draws out the third movement, the slow movement, and he turns it into this just epic and slow movement. He turns this symphony into Mahler 4, where it's just got this monster slow movement that's the absolute focus of the recording, and he really draws your attention to that third movement. So yeah, it's quite effective, and I really enjoyed this. But I think the best one of the four is the Previn with the London Symphony. He was an absolute master at Russian repertoire. I feel like he has a better handle on the idiom than the other conductors do. This is like how I expect Prokofiev to sound, but again, he draws things out of the score that other people seem to have missed. I can really hear details. The recordings, excellent recording. You can hear all these details and like the woodwinds and the horn sections and just um, it checks all the boxes. I think just everything goes right on this recording. So those four, I'd say Previn, London is the winner. So, like I said, Flowering Spikes, he did a video, he did a shootout with versions of the Firebird Suite. And he voted for, as his winner was Boulez and the New York Phil, his earlier recording. I'm not familiar with that recording. I'm sure it's really good. A lot of the recordings he picked weren't ones I was familiar with. He did pick the Antal Dorati London, which is my go-to on Mercury Living Presence. That's still, I think, the best Firebird that I'm familiar with. But there's one other one that did not make the list that I think could have made the list quite easily, and that's this recording with the Concertgebouw, Colin Davis. This is, I seem to recall back in the day when there was like the Penguin Guide recordings, that this was a pretty highly praised recording, and or at one time it was kind of one of the recommended recordings. So I'm surprised this one didn't make his list. I listened to this a couple weeks ago. Dynamite recording, very just sumptuous sound from the Concertgebouw and that lovely concert hall they have. This was just like what you want, a good analog recording. Vinyl's dead quiet, like the Phillips discs usually are. So I just think this is a wonderful recording that easily could have made his list. And that brings me to the next topic I want to talk about. So, some really exciting news has come out. I think we're all familiar with, or classical mavens are familiar with, the original Source series that Deutsche Grammophone's been putting out, where they got, I'll give you an example right now. This is what I'm talking about. The original Source series, where they've remastered, mixed by Reinhard Mahler, cut by Sidney Meyer, directly from Analog Source at the Emil Berliner Studios. Woohoo! So, now the news is that we're going to get a similar line of analog recordings from both Decca and Phillips. This is spectacular news. I think we're all really happy to be hearing that. So there's been a batch of 3 that have come out already. I have ordered the Colin Davis Sibelius Symphony 5 and 7 with the Boston Symphony. So I forget what the first batch of 3 were. Of the 3, the only one I was really interested in was the Colin Davis. I love me some Sibelius. So I haven't heard this yet, but I'm sure it's going to sound absolutely great. So, like I said, the only one I've ordered so far was the Sibelius 5 and 7. That's going to be great. I'm familiar with the recording. Looking forward to hearing that. There's a second batch which is going to be on its way. They've announced the second batch of recordings. This will include um, the Alpine Symphony, conducted by George Schulte, Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra. Now, I'm familiar with that recording also. This is my copy. This is a great two for disc of. I'm not the biggest Schulte fan in the world, but I'm surprised how really good this disc is. Um, the Alpine Symphony is maybe the highlight, but there's a really fine Heldenleben with Vienna. Um, yeah, the Heldenleben's really good in here also. So this is one of the ones that's going to come out, and when the Alpine Symphony hits, I'm definitely picking that one up. So something else that they've announced hasn't come out yet, but we're going to get Symphony 5 from Gustav Mahler, conducted by Bernard Haitink. Now, get this. This is an amazing Mahler 5. This is my copy. I have it on the SACD. I listened to it last week to refresh my memory. I wanted to see how the SACD held up. It's amazing. I don't need to get the new version because I'm quite happy with this one. But it's a fantastic Mahler 5. I don't know if I've ever heard it done better. So that's great news. When that comes out, if you're not familiar with this recording, snag that. And I'll be snagging the Richard Strauss when it comes out. So that got me to thinking, wow, we're going to have a lot of recordings from the Decca and Phillips labels. So this is where it gets fun. Feel free to add comments to this video if you watch this. I'm going to make some guesses or predictions or some things I like to see them put out. And God only knows what the label's going to put out. But so there's a lot of things on both Decca and Phillips that's an embarrassment of riches. The pattern seems to be that they're going with analog recordings from the 70s. We're not seeing any Tulip label pressings showing up. There's got to be some reason why they're doing that, but they seem to be going from the 70s. There have been some digital source recordings that have come out as part of the analog sources, but I'm assuming that they're going to be going with analog recordings from the 70s or 80s. So I think there's two ways they could go about doing this. They could either so what are some recordings that would be like obvious choices? Some like crown jewels that have been very popular. They'd be like, yeah, of course they picked that one. That's kind of predictable. I'd say one that would easily be one that I would not be surprised if we saw would be Haitink's recording of Debussy orchestral works. This was my first copy. I got this in the 90s when I first got into classical, and it's still my benchmark for how Debussy should sound. Amazing recordings, concertgebouw, classic. They've been classics ever since they first appeared. I've upgraded my copies. I upgraded from that to an SACD of Lemaire and Prelude of the Afternoon of Fawn, Iberia. And I also have a Japanese vinyl of some of the same material. Nocturnes, just wonderful stuff. So I don't need to get this again. I'm very happy with what I got. But yeah, I think this would be an excellent candidate for their vinyl reissues. They could, I've already mentioned this one. Another great candidate. Maybe they'll go with this one. So in the Decca world, I think, once again, an obvious choice. One that if they're going to go for the obvious choice, they might go with this one. This is Zubin Mehta and the Planet Suite. A very, very famous recording. It's been reissued a million times. Maybe they'll reissue it again. My second copy of it. First time I attempted to get one, I got one in the dollar bin. It was pretty scratched up. And a couple months ago, I upgraded to a Japanese vinyl copy. Much better, much cleaner. Very happy with it. So then there are things which I'd like them to put out that are maybe not so obvious. A not so obvious choice I think would be a great candidate. This disc of Dvorak string quintets with Stephen Bishop on keyboards. Absolutely love this recording. Dvorak is the king of chamber music, even better than Brahms. This is an absolute gem from the Dvorak repertoire. I We've not seen a tremendous amount of chamber music in the original source. Um, yeah, I think this is a good candidate. I'm probably going to come back to this topic because there's so many albums that they could pick, and I'm just going with a few right now that I think are good candidates. You could do a whole video on just Mahler alone. There's so many great Mahler recordings, so we're not even going to talk about Mahler tonight. Another good candidate is this recording of which is this is another one that's been in my collection since I first got into classical. We got Raymond Leppard conducting the English Chamber Orchestra and Bach. This particular CD includes violin concertos with Arthur Grumio. Maybe, maybe we'll see that. I upgraded my copy to vinyl recently, and this is just the Brandenburgs. But by God, this sounds really good. Such a clean pressing. Just analog goodness at its best. Super quiet vinyl. Just a regular old. Just a regular. Yeah, I wouldn't need to upgrade it. I'm perfectly happy with this copy. But if they put out the Grumio concertos, then that's a different story. Here's another one, sort of a companion to the Zubin Mehta. Another, perhaps an obvious choice, but a companion to the Zubin Mehta. This famous recording of Mehta in the L.A. Phil. He does Schoenberg, Transfigured Night, and he couples it with Scriabin's Poem of Ecstasy. Very fine recording. Maybe this is a good candidate for release. Um, Another good one from the Decca catalog, and this might surprise you, but this is a dynamite Beethoven 7. Again, I'm not the biggest Schulte fan in the world. I think once he took over in Chicago, he just phoned it in for about 2 decades. But this is an exception. This one's absolute killer. Love this recording of the seventh. Apparently, won a Grammy for it. Not that that means a whole lot because the Grammys are kind of like the Oscars. So I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to predict that this next one is one that they're going to release. Um, it's not a super common. It's not. It's not as. It hasn't been reissued to death, but it's been reissued quite a bit. It's recognized as a classic in its repertoire that hasn't been touched yet by original source or anyone else. And that's these recordings of the Bartok piano concertos, also with Stephen Bishop, and Colin Davis conducting. Um, Not the original album covers that came out at the time. I think this came out as 3 LPs with different artwork than what you see here. But these are, these have been reissued quite a number of times themselves. Definitely highly regarded, but again, not repertoire that's been beaten to death. So I'm going to make a prediction that this is one that they would reissue because I think a lot of people would be really excited to see this one come out. So yeah, just real lastly, gonna just touch on. I mentioned while we're talking about Previn, um, some Previn that was not included in the Warner Brothers box. His Von Williams cycle when he was still on RCA. Um, these the only versions I've had over the years have been these kind of lackluster 80s era RCA compact discs. They sound okay, but I'd really like to get a better version. I did recently get an original. Part of the problem with the Previn set is the RCA recordings came out during the era of Dynagroove. So if you want to hear really good copies, you need to go for the imports. I did recently manage to score an import of Symphony Number 2, the London Symphony. Um, there's a record store on Discogs in Britain that kind of specializes in slightly beat up copies that they can't charge top price for. But if you're tolerant for a little bit of noise, they have quite a bit of good stuff at reasonable prices. So I picked this one up. Yeah, it does kind of a bad scratch on at the beginning of the first movement. Um, it goes away after a minute or two. It's not a terrible scratch, and the rest of the album is dead quiet. So I'm pretty happy with this. It's nice to hear an upgrade of that recording. I do think that the Previn recordings have been reissued or remastered since. I got this weirdo disc of the first symphony, Previn conducting. You can see on the back that it's a Japanese pressing, so it looks like they have been remastered. I couldn't even find this sucker on Discogs, so I don't know what the story is with this. But it looks like that cycle has been remastered at some point. So there are better copies out there, but good luck trying to find them. That disc is just a weird disc. So the other cycle that I'm starting to check out is Leonard Slatkin's cycle with the Philharmonia. I got turned on to the third and fourth symphony a couple years ago. For whatever reason, I was not thrilled with that disc. Maybe I need to listen to it again. But I picked up this disc of Symphony Number 7. Different story. Now, this is an absolute killer recording. A fantastic recording of the 7th. So I may be checking out some more of the Slatkin recordings. So yeah, I'm looking for some new recordings of the Vaughan Williams cycle, and this looks like one I'm going to be listening to more of. Anyway, that's what I got going on. So I hope to do these videos more frequently. It's been about 2 months since I did the last one, but there you have it, folks. You all have a good evening, and I'll be checking back in with you guys again soon. Take care. Have a good night.